Welcome everybody to another episode of the Nerd Continuity, where we talk about design development and all other crazy sort of stuff that we find online. Today is the episode 24, and the title of this episode is Dealing with the Fear of Failure and Rejection. This is a really common feeling, especially in our field, or pretty much in every field that involves you putting yourself out there as a professional. So if you want to be a developer, you want to be a designer, or even if you're trying to change your field, if you have been working in the same sector for many years and you want to try to do something different, something not really related to your study field, to what you studied when you were young, and now you're trying to change, and all these fears are coming out. You don't want to fail, you don't want to be rejected, you really don't know how to put yourself out there. So this is kind of like really common, and this was one of the main questions that was sent or that was submitted in the forum from Sam. And I have other questions and I have other topics for this amazing episode 24. As usual, I'm Alex Alessandro Halecad, whatever. I'm your host and creator of this podcast. If you want to support me, if you want to support my channel, this podcast, the forum, and all the other things that I'm releasing, you can check the support me page of my website or go straight directly on the Patreon page that I recently opened. You can go to patreon.com/Alecad with 3D at the end, and you can check all the possible pledges that you could do, from $1 up to $50 if you need assistance, if you need like one-on-one tutorials or one-on-one sessions for a work, a project, or studying. You can pick whatever you want. But anyway, if you want to participate to the conversation, you want to leave comments or questions for the next episode, please come to the forum at forum.alecad with 3D at the end as usual.com. You can sign up for free, and the community is kind of growing. We have I guess like 30-ish active users that post pretty much every day. Questions are really broad. Like we talk about development and design. We talk about, I don't know, where are you from and what music do you listen to when you're coding, or other stuff. Like it's pretty broad, and it's growing, and I love it. It's really exciting. But let's start with the topics of today. So the first topic was a question sent from Kamal Hines, that is also one of the active Patreon supporter. And thank you so much, Kamal. And his question is, seen some articles online regarding REST API, JavaScript specifically versus PHP for WordPress development, and I'm just wondering what's your view on these, and also if REST API is better and faster than PHP. What does this mean? Could WordPress development now move to a JavaScript base instead of PHP? Okay, I know that kind of like can feel kind of confusing, because it's like there's something that we love as developers, especially developers that they work on big projects like big frameworks or big CMS. We like to say something and don't explain what to say. So this is one of the most common cases, like not understanding what an API is, or not understanding what something new, when something new is coming out, what it is, how it works, and how it's gonna affect the current workflow that we're using. So first, a big clarification. REST API are not gonna replace PHP API, and these two things are completely different. So first, WordPress has its own API. So the settings API, the customizer API, the widgets API, or the, custom fields API, all these kind of stuff are API. And API, like the broad stand meaning of the API, is an application programming interface. So it's not related to any type of script, is not bounded to PHP or ASP or Qt or Ruby on Rails. Is not bounded to a specific programming language. An API can be written in every language. WordPress has these multiple type of APIs that are part of the main CMS, of the core of WordPress. And these APIs are just as the word says, an interface, a programming interface to tap some core functionalities of WordPress. So with the settings API, you can activate settings, custom administration panels. With the widgets API, you can create your own custom widgets and all this kind of stuff. And all these PHP APIs are part and have to be activated through the core. Like you need to write a function, a method, a class to extend or tap these API from within WordPress. So inside your theme or inside your custom plugin, you write some code that uses these API from within WordPress itself, from within the application itself. A REST API is something different, and REST stands for Representational State Transfer. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a mouthful and it doesn't clarify anything. But a REST API, it basically is used to decouple architecture. That means that various components of a site or an app are separated from each other. They're not together. So decoupled means they're separated or not all together. And your site can be stored in one place and interact with the data that it's in another place. Or the data is stored in a completely separated environment, in a completely separated website. So you have these type of REST architecture that allows you to concatenate and have a conversation between different platforms on different applications in different places, in different stored in different locations. That's kind of like the broad explanation. And the REST API most likely are built in JavaScript because thanks to JavaScript, you can have an AJAX type of communication with these data, the data that you want to tap. And the AJAX is an asynchronous JavaScript and XML method that allows you to do some call. These type of calls are HTTP calls. So the HTTP calls are the usual get, post, delete, put, update. So are just like commands that you send to this application that accepts these HTTP requests to say, hey, I want to get that data, or I want to delete that data, or I want to update that data. It's just like REST API is just for data, just to interact with data and get something in return. And most likely, like pretty much 99% of the time, the REST API returns a JSON file or a JSON data written in a JSON format. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's the format where these APIs return your data, the data that you're asking. And it's up to you, it's up to your JavaScript or your PHP to read this JSON and print it on your web pages. So this is the main difference between the PHP kind of API and the REST API. PHP API, it's part of the core of the application, and you use them to activate some specific sections of the application. You can extend the application, you can create new sections, you can activate new parts or new functionalities of the application. The REST API are meant to be just a bridge between different applications, I guess, or the same application stored in different locations just to interact with data. That's the main difference. So D2 can be used together, PHP API and REST API, and one doesn't really necessarily exclude the other, especially considering that most of the times your WordPress installation is stored in the same location of your database. So you don't need to create REST APIs to interact with your data because your WordPress is in the same location of your database, so they can access directly. REST APIs are used to allow other websites to access the data of your website. So if you, I don't know, thinking of like an obvious example, if you want to embed Google Map in your website, or you want to embed like a weather widget on your website, most likely those widgets, those plugins are interacting with the API of the service that provides those plugins. So the service provides the data, and then your website prints that data in your WordPress installation, your theme. And you can do the same with your theme. So if you have a WordPress website, for example, a school website with the schedule of all the classes or the monthly classes or this kind of stuff, you can activate the REST API of WordPress to allow other website or other application, a mobile application even, to tap that data, the data that you have stored in your database about classes, hours, teachers, to be pulled, to be called from other applications, to be print and return that data to other applications. So a student can have its own app tapping the RSS feed. That's another thing, sorry, tapping your school or its own school website to get that data inside its own app without visiting the school website. That's the main purpose of the REST API. Having like a door open for other application to communicate with the data in your website, in your WordPress database. But as I said, REST API and PHP API are two separated things. They're not interfering with each other. You can use them both, and one doesn't mean that it's gonna exclude the other. And to conclude your question, I don't think that WordPress development is gonna move to a JavaScript-based development instead of PHP, because that sounds kind of silly to me. It's like, of course, WordPress will always be PHP, or I guess, like, I don't know, I'm not sure, but probably until something better comes up, but I don't know. But of course, like the REST API, the JavaScript API of WordPress are going to be implemented and extended a lot, because WordPress is turning more and more into a sort of framework instead of just a CMS. So building a web app or building a community or building like just a hub of information, a magazine, or something more complex than just a blog or just like a personal portfolio, it's really possible with WordPress. So of course it's extending out. The developers are creating all these stuff to extend the functionalities of WordPress to interact better with other applications and be more scalable. And the REST API, it's a good step in the right direction. REST API, I used them in the past. For example, something that I did in the past, I built a WordPress website to collect and organize all the classes and courses for a trade type of university. So carpenters, engineers, mechanics, all these type of trades. There was a specific university for trades. And I created all, like, the website was really big because it was collecting all these different, well, like 150 different courses and classes for the entire university. And it was a subdomain based on WordPress of the main domain. The main website was built in Drupal, wasn't built in WordPress. So the database were completely separated, but the client needed to print the list of information of these classes, courses, and all the availability of the teachers also in the main website, on the main website built in Drupal. So I created a JavaScript, just a JavaScript library built in a regular jQuery to send an HTTP request and tap the REST API of WordPress to grab the data that I had stored in my database in the subdomain based on WordPress to be printed in the main Drupal website. So that's one of like the most obvious example that you can, like, I can tell you to how to use the REST API, but having the REST API didn't affect at all the PHP settings API or whatever type of PHP API of WordPress, because the two things are completely different. So hope that's clear, hope that clarifies your doubts, and I suggest you do definitely try, like build a simple website, activate the REST API that right now are not built in inside WordPress, but you can activate them through a plugin, WP REST API, that it's an official plugin from Automatic. So activate the REST API and try from another website to tap the data that it's inside your website. Just build a simple JavaScript HTTP request and gather all the data that you want. It's gonna be pretty fun, absolutely. The other question on the episode 24 of the Nerd Continuity is from Bambule that he asked on the forum at forum.alecad.com. He asks how do you calculate the costs of a website from a static HTML page to the complete package with custom backend work, etc. What it may cost. So that's a really interesting question, because if you noticed, I never ever talked about money on my tutorials or on my vlogs or stuff like that. That's mainly because the cost of a project or a website, it's 100% related to two main factors: your experience and your location. Because the prices that I have, like the price range that I have here in Canada, are completely different from the price range that I have in Italy, or I had back in Italy, or I could have in London, or I could have in Berlin. Or so like the price and the cost of a website or like whatever type of development changes drastically based on your location. So we can exclude that. It's really hard to talk about money when no one is on your same place, in your same location. So that's why I never talked about money. But I can give you some advice of how I calculate my price or how I interact when it comes to calculating the cost of a specific work. First, you have to define your price range, your tag, like your hourly rate. Everything has to be based on hourly rate, because your work or the value of your work is based on how much time you spend on that specific job. So you cannot, that's one of the like big misconceptions when it comes to freelancing. You see like you have a request for a website of 5 pages and you say, okay, those 5 pages, I can do it for $2,000. Like right off the bat, like on the top of my head, like $2,000 is fine. This is kind of wrong to say it, because you don't know first how complicated those 5 pages are, and you don't know how much time will take you to do those 5 pages. And it's not fair for you, and it's not fair for the client as well. So you need to define how much do you value yourself per hour. That's kind of like the weirdest part. And to do that, you can do a simple Google research. You can search in your area, in your country, what's the hourly rate for a developer, what's the hourly rate of a designer. Just take an average. And if you're a beginner, if you just started, just put your rate kind of below the average, or like really affordable rate. Offer an affordable rate because you don't have much experience. If you've been doing this for many years, you can put like a higher rate and just ask for what you think you're worth it. But everything has to be based per hour. You cannot decide the cost of something just because you think it's easy or because you think it's complicated. Just everything has to be based on our hourly rate. Like you're getting paid to use your time. So you have to be paid for the time that you spend, not the complexity of the project or how the project is cute, whatever other reason. So after you define your hourly rate, it's up to you to understand with a quick meeting with the client how much complex, how much complicated, how much time you will spend on that specific project. And of course, when you do a meeting with the client, you should bill the client. You should say, hey, this meeting is also paid. And probably you can offer the client, if it's a first meeting, you can offer like a 50% discount, say, hey, you have to pay me for this meeting, but It's just a discovery session, so it can be half of the price, like half of the usual price that I ask, but always get paid for your time. If the project is really, really big and it's gonna go on for months, you cannot define, okay, it's gonna take me 275 hours to complete, because that's a really long-term estimate, and a long-term estimate is never accurate. It's kind of impossible to be accurate. So what you have to do, you have to say, this is my hourly rate. I'm gonna work every day 3 hours per day for this project for 5 days a week. And this is my monthly rate. So you have to pay me this per month. This work is gonna go on for 3 months. So this is my monthly rate, because you don't know how much time could take you to do it. It's like the estimate is too long. So you need to define a monthly or a bi-weekly rate if you get paid bi-weekly. But it's all based on the amount of time that you will spend per day on that specific project. Always remember that. So it doesn't matter your location, it doesn't matter your skill set, your skill level. Define a price that you think you value, of course, according to the average price, the market of your area. You cannot say, if the average price for a good developer in your city is $50 per hour, you cannot say my price is $200 per hour. No one will hire you. It's kind of like absurd. But set a price, set your own price per hour, and then define every work based on the amount of time that you spend on that specific work. That's it. I hope that helps, and I hope that helps someone else, other freelancers that they don't really know how much to ask on first jobs, how to evaluate the complexity of a job, how much you should ask for that specific work. Just put everything into a simple calculation, like how much time I'm gonna spend. I want this thought per hour, so this is the total cost. That's it. And always, always, always add more hours, because you need a pillow, like a safety pillow, in case the project goes off rail. Always don't evaluate, don't underestimate the amount of hours that a project could take you. Always put, if it's a simple project, always put a couple of hours extra just in case. And if you don't use them, you can always say to the client, hey, I didn't use all the hours, so you can pay me less. But always have safety net in case. And we are finally at the main topic of this episode 24 of the Nerd Continuity. And the main question is kind of like a tough one, because I've been dealing with this for like pretty much my entire life. And the main question comes from Sam Upachin from the forum, or from the Patreon. He's one of the other amazing Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Alicad. And the question is the following. Can you tell us about yourself, how you're doing, and what keeps you up at night? I've been pushing to learn more code-based stuff, but I still refuse to apply for a work related to coding. I mean, you went to school, referring to myself, you went to school and stuff, and I'm kind of someone who learned these things on his own. There's a fear for not getting the job, and also trying to apply with the most perfect portfolio. Are there any story from your side you can tell us to bring back some courage? So first of all, thank you so much, Sam, for asking this question, especially for asking advice. I never consider myself someone like advice worthy or something like that. My experience could inspire someone else or could give courage to someone else, but I guess that's true. Like that could be it. And if I rethink at my history of what I did in the past, it's kind of like, yes, I changed a lot about my life, and I risked a lot in the past. So starting from the past, if you probably, I don't know if you listen to the first episode of the Nerd Continuity that I released like a couple of years ago, I was a designer. I actually wanted to be an architect I finished high school, graduating in architectural design, and I wanted to be an architect. So I went to university studying architecture. And then I dropped from university after 3 months because that happens. I mean, you cannot decide. I don't think you're mature enough when you're 19 or 20 to decide your entire life. Like your priorities, what you like, what you don't like, completely change based on your years, your experience. So when I was 16, 17, I always loved architecture. I wanted to be an architect. Then 2-3 years have passed. I studied architecture. I didn't really love it like I was expecting to. So I no, I don't really like to do this. And I started, well, instead of going to the university, instead of like attending classes, I was spending my nights using the computer. And I would start doing some web design because I was good at design. I was like drawing stuff, so I was good at design. And then I joined an online community. It was like a really old forum with designers and developers. And I started getting fascinated by these guys like coding stuff. Like I was wondering how this website works, how this chat is made of. Like this is really intriguing. Like I want to be able to build something like that. And then I got hooked with an online RPG, a role-playing game online based by chat. It was a Star Trek themed RPG, and it was amazing because it was all code based. It was just a gigantic community with many people interacting with each other, and I was amazed by the functionalities of this RPG. And that's it. I think that moment started my passion for coding. So I started spending nights in coding and trying to learn and stealing code and stealing graphics away and try to recreate my stuff. And after, I guess, 5 or 6 months, I decided, yes, I don't want to do architecture anymore. I want to be a web developer. That's what I decided. And that was a terrible time for me because my girlfriend is looking at me right now and she's laughing because she knows. She remembers we were already together at that time because my parents didn't understand really. For them, using computers were just just playing. For them, I was just playing. I wasn't like using the computer to do job to get paid. It wasn't something real. I was just wasting time. And the choices back in Italy, like 14 years ago or something like that, back in Italy, choice to study proper computer programming were really limited. There wasn't a broad understanding of the web, but it wasn't really a broad understanding of the path that a web developer should do. So I started buying books. Every time I was able to make some money, I was just spending this money to buy PHP books, CSS, SQL books, JavaScript books, and I started studying on these gigantic, massive books where it was awful. Then finally, after a couple of years, my mom agreed to pay for a school, 3 years classes to study web design and development. And those were kind of like the most amazing years ever because it was just a dream. I was doing all this kind of stuff. But the problem is my mom told me that it was kind of like a bad thing, but told me that if I wasn't able to find a job pretty much immediately, a job related to what I was studying, I I had to repay her back of all the money that she was spending for my school, for my education. So there was this kind of agreement with my mom and say, okay, if you pay for my school, I will find immediately a job. If I don't, I will just get the first job that I can find, even like working as I don't know, in a store or just housemaid or whatever, just like doing the first job that I could get to repay you back, like pay you back all the money that you're spending for my education. That was the first deal. So since the first year of my web development classes, I started looking for a job. And at the beginning, it was terrible because I was afraid that I wasn't good enough. I was 21 when I actually went to school, I spent like the past 3 years studying by myself. And going to school, I met all these people that studied programming before, and they were all better than me in every scenario, in every aspect. And I started honestly like doubting about myself. Like, am I really that good? Will I be able to find a job? Will I be able to do something for real for a client? Can I actually build a website? And my fear was so strong that kept me up at night, pretty much every night. So I wasn't sleeping much. I was trying to find jobs by like the most shitty jobs ever, like do a website for a coffee shop, like a really small one single page coffee shop website, or do a website for a printing company. And you have to think about this, like at 14 years ago, it's not like today that, oh, you have to do a website for a coffee shop, so you have to be really hip, really fancy, really on the edge, has to be cool with cool photography. 14 years ago, no one, especially in Italy, no one gave a crap about the internet. So telling someone, hey, you have to pay me for a website, the first reaction was like, why? Like, that's stupid. No one's gonna look for my coffee shop on the web. That's so stupid. So that was the thing. Like, finding first gigs or first paid job was really hard. So my first couple of years were just like free stuff. I started doing websites for friends just to do something, just to grow a portfolio. And I started doing stuff for myself, just like, let's code a chat, let's code an RPG, let's code a forum, just for myself, just to learn. And then after a while, I started getting paid a really stupid amount of money, like really low amount of money. Like, I was getting paid once every 4 months by these kind of like creative agency I was working with, and I was doing all kind of different things. I was just like doing video editing and websites and flash animations and 3D animations, and I was also like moving boxes around, helping with the inventory. I was doing everything possible to get employed, but they didn't pay me much. They paid me like once or twice in 6 months. And it was a really terrible time. And the more I was going on, the more I was doubting about myself. Like, hey, no one will ever take me seriously, and I will fail. Like, I will never be able to do what I want to do. Like, I will never be a good developer. I will never be a good designer. I'm average in every aspect. I'm average in doing 3D. I'm average in doing video editing. I'm average in doing coding. And that was like pretty much the big part of the last year of school, of my development school. And the last year, finally, thanks to this crappy job that I had and they didn't pay me, I met a client, and this client had another creative agency. Like, it was a creative agency that has this office where I was working, if they had someone good in doing a website, because they needed a website super quickly. Like, it was a Flash website, they needed quickly, and they asked if they had someone. I was there, so I said, hey, I can do that. I can do that website. They basically hired me after this website because I did it super quickly. I did it overnight, of course, because I didn't sleep. I was so excited to get finally a real opportunity, and I did it super quickly, and it was terrible, but it was great for them. So I got hired after a week. So this moment was at the same time when I got my graduation. So I graduated from these 3 years classes of web development, and after a week I got hired full-time permanent to this company. And that was like the biggest achievement of my life. Like, I was so happy, and it was finally happening. I was like getting paid to be a web developer. I found a job, like a steady job in development and design, and it was fantastic. And from that moment, I kept going. I kept like studying and doing more work, finding other clients, and then I decided to move to Canada after a while. But that's another story. But the important thing is that at the beginning, everyone feels the same. At the beginning, everyone, when you have to do something that it's outside your comfort zone, you're gonna fear failure. You're gonna think, oh, I'm gonna fail, I'm not good enough, they're gonna reject me. So everyone thinks the same. You're not the only one that thinks that. And the best way of fighting this fear is by doing it. You're afraid of not getting the job because your portfolio is not perfect. Who cares? Just apply for the job. If your portfolio is not perfect, they will not call you, they will tell you they will not hire you, but at least you know that your portfolio needs more work. If you don't apply because you fear that your portfolio is not good, you will never have a feedback about your portfolio. It's kind of like the same things that I had when I moved to Canada here. I had like just Italian websites on my portfolio. My skills weren't that great 3-4 years ago. I became a really good developer in the last couple of years. Before, like I was like an average, like a decent developer, but not a really good one. Like another thousands of people were at my same level. And so when I decided to go to Canada, like my portfolio wasn't that great, but I said, hey, this is like just one chance. Like I have this chance and it's just one life chance. Like I can, if I fail now, I will never be able to do this thing again in Canada. I will never be able to come back again and try again. So I have to give 100% everything I have. Who cares if they don't like my stuff? I will keep apply. And I got rejected. Like the first couple of job interviews were terrible, went terribly. I didn't get hired, of course, and they sent me away. It's like, no, you're not what we're looking for. And then I found a job because my skill set, my portfolio was good for someone, and that's great. So even if you don't consider yourself good, there's always someone out there that will need you. Will need you for your skills, will need you for something specific that you know how to do instead of someone else doesn't know how to do it. So use the fear or use your own doubt or your own fear of failure to motivate yourself in doing more. That's kind of like anxiety has to be your best friend. It's kind of like one of the worst advice ever, but embrace your anxiety. Just like leave the anxiety, leave the fear, and let it grow, let it motivate yourself. No, just like do it. Like you will never be perfect. You will never be at the point where you say, hey, I'm perfect, I will never get rejected. Even if you're great, you will always get rejection. And rejection is good sometimes because it will help you grow and will help you understand what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right. So just do it. Of course, be prepared to failure. Like don't just leave everything and jump in the pit fire without thinking of the consequences. Just be prepared of the consequences if something goes wrong, but just jump. Try to jump and try to do what you want to do. Well, I guess that's pretty much it for these episodes. I guess I answer all the questions, and these main topics were kind of important because they're not only 100% coding related, but that can be helpful for pretty much everyone that is going through something like a life-changing or a work-changing experience. So let me know what you think. Like you can join the forum or you can leave a comment below in this podcast. If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, please give it give it a like or subscribe to my channel. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes or whatever other app that you're using to listen to the podcast, please rate this episode, give it some stars or give it a like and put it as favorite or something just to have some sort of feedback from you if you guys like it or not. And just leave a comment, leave a message, let me know what you think, and Do you have a relatable experience to this? Do you have something similar? Please let me know. And as usual, thank you so much, guys, for listening to the podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for the support on the forum, on Patreon, on YouTube. You guys are great. It's just all thanks to you that I'm able to do these things, and I'm really loving it. So thank you so much, guys, and I talk to you in the next episode. Bye.